You're listening to the Packernet Podcast Network.
We all have smartphones, and we all know they're pretty amazing, but they also can be amazingly distracting, especially when we're around other people. So US Cellular wants us to reset our relationship with our phones by putting down our phones for $5. That's right, a company that sells phones wants us to put down our phones. And to see what we find, learn more at uscellular.com/built for us.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
What's up, gang? Welcome into Good Morning Lambeau. My name is Clayton. You can check us out on Packernet.com. Find me on Twitter at Packers_access. Email us, PackersTotalAccess@gmail.com. Text us, 865-658-5824. Join alongside Tim live in Green Bay. We've got Jacob in Wisconsin on the Minnesota border here to talk a little Packers this morning. Talk some way too early 53, a little bit of contract talk as well. And we were this close to launching the new college football podcast this morning, but we're going to hold it probably until tomorrow morning. We'll do our very first version of that and get you guys and gals kind of geared up for some college football this year as well, and more specifically kind of keyed in around from a Packer fan's perspective, if you will. So that being said, Tim, good to have you back, buddy. How you doing this morning?
Happy to be here. Got a cup of diesel going for the morning show, Got to get it going. I just, woke up like 9 minutes ago, so ready to roll.
Same here, man. I slept in just a touch, and I ran upstairs to try to put some kind of content together. Jacob, how you doing, Bubba?
Oh, I'm good. Just getting ready to go to work after this, but besides that, I'm good.
Gotcha. And I just want to warn people, you're going to hear the term meat missiles. That's Jacob's fault. All right. Tim already said, whoa, Lord, what did I miss?
Almost spit out my coffee.
So basically yesterday, Jacob was referring to a player being very aggressive or not being aggressive enough. And he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, launching themselves like meat missiles, and the chat went crazy. So
you're an amazing person. You know that, don't you?
Always leave it up to Jacob to create another phrase here on the show that people go, what?
For a while yesterday, we thought it was just going to be me and Emilio hosting the show. And I don't know if that would have worked. I think we would have gotten canceled. So it's a blessing that Clayton was able to do it.
My favorite, though, was offline when they were talking about doing a show together. They said, yeah, we could. He said, okay, it's just going to be me. It's just going to be Jacob and Emilio. And I think it was Jacob that said, yeah, we'll call it Beards and Burritos.
So bad it's good.
All right, so let's get right into it here. As far as what's on tap today, first things first, Edgerrin Cooper has signed his contract. Now, you guys know we've been very vocal. Listen, don't worry. The deals are going to get done. Don't stress it, right? But when the deals do get done, we want to talk about the details of it. And this is one of my favorite times of the year as a Packers fan or just a fan in general, because you get to see just how important the NFL draft is. Because essentially what you've got are these – what could be potential studs, and we all know it's a lottery ticket, basically, when you draft a player, right? You don't know how good they're going to be. They could be a complete bust. You could find a late-round gem like a Zach Tom, a Dontavian Wicks, one of those type of players. Romeo Dobbs, another one. But the most enjoyable part for me is seeing the low cap hits, right? And seeing just how this can set you up for the next 3-4 years with low cap hits at specific positions and players that can add value to your team like Jaden Reed did last year, obviously. there were several players I feel like they really hit on last year that did contribute quite a bit. But let's just get right to it. Here are the cap hits for 2024. And if you notice towards the bottom of the list, about 4 or 5 from the bottom there, you'll see Edgerrin Cooper. And notice his cap hit is only $1.5 million. And not only that, guys, I want to get your all's take on this. It's pretty cool. Look at the players around him, okay? Look at Tucker Kraft. Tucker Kraft contributed. He didn't have a drop until the playoffs. And that was one that I don't even know if it got counted as a drop, to be honest with you. Like, he showed that he had sure hands. We know he's an athletic freak. He was durable all year. His blocking got better all year. Only $1.2 million cap hit. You go up to Edgerrin Cooper, like I said, $1.5 million. Look right above him, Jaden Reed, our leading receiver last year in yards. And not to mention, he was effective in the run game, too, on the jet sweeps and the pop passes. $1.6 million cap hit. Right above him, Luke Musgrave, 1.9. Christian Watson, when he's on the field, he can tilt the field, right? $2.5 million cap hit. Pretty wild, man. Devontae Wyatt had a pressure rate that was, I think he had the 22nd highest pressure rate against the pass. Now, we're not going to talk about the run, all right? But against the pass, the guy can get after the quarterback. $3.5 million cap hit. I mean, it's important to kind of keep those things in perspective. But what do you guys think? We'll go around the horn here. I'll start with you, Jacob. Edgerrin Cooper, $1.5 million, man. Pretty cool.
I mean, if you look at even look at Xavier McKinney's annual per, that's nothing. $7.8 million for arguably the best safety in the league.
Someone cooked here.
If you look downwards from that gentleman there and just look at all the guys that are below that, what does that look like to you? That looks like some savings, y'all. That's some Dollar General, TJ Maxx, Fawcett Ross style savings. All right. You look just as good as everybody else. You're just about 3 seasons behind as far as, the trends and patterns. That's why I look really cool in 2020. Like, all my clothes now were hot in 2020. You know what I mean? So just get that little discount. That's all.
Yeah. Tim, I see you laughing. Stay out of the chat, man. They're off the rails.
Oh, I'm not. Yeah. I don't want any parts of that. No, I'm just laughing at Jacob because Jacob's going winter clothes shopping right now, right? You get all the
absolutely
bingo, man. It's hoodie season right now. Go get your hoodies right now.
Yep. And then in January, Jacob's buying shorts and t-shirts and
absolutely.
Yeah, that's how you do it, man.
Yeah.
That's how you do it for sure. But I think with this cap talk, seriously, like, build the statue already. I want a Goody statue. I want a Russ Ball statue. You can put it next to the Mark Murphy statue that they should build.
And none of those Allen Iverson statues that are like half his size. Did you guys
see? No, like
he pet himself. He's like, oh.
Yeah. No, we'll do real deal, just like Vincent Curley out there. We'll just add him to the row, make it look real nice. But this is just some great front office work. And it's amazing to see what really with such a little bit of time in these last couple of seasons, what Goody's done to flip this roster and get us set up for arguably the next 10 years, really going forward. So I'm happy with the deals. And, obviously, like Jacob alluded to a few weeks ago, he had a really good point. It's going to be really tough down the road here in the near future to keep all of these guys when you're just so loaded like this. But again, I'd rather have that problem than, to be a team that is just constantly struggling and searching for the right personnel and then balancing that with the cap. So I think, our front office has kind of mastered that art here of getting young, fresh talent in here and then keeping a few veteran pieces and keeping us under the cap, setting us up going forward. So as a fan, I'm happy.
Under the cap next year to the tune of $60-some million. Right? I mean, it's in pretty decent shape there in that regard. The other thing, too, if you'll notice, Devondre Campbell's showing that he's carrying a $14.2 million cap hit. That changes after June 1st. So that'll drop down significantly. Now, overall, the dead cap is the dead cap. So the bottom line, when you look up in 2 years, you're still going to would have been on the hook as far as cap hit for a certain amount. But they just chose to, hey, let's absorb a little bit of it next year, too. And that kind of steers into the conversation that we've talked about before, where are they going to try to front load Jordan Love's new contract just a touch to take some of the heat off the backside? That could be the case as well. So just kind of cool to see how the contracts lay out there and how everything falls into place. Now, something that you mentioned too, Tim, and maybe you mentioned it too, Jacob, you're eventually going to have to pay some of these players, right? that's where you get into a caller called in on Packernet After Dark the other day, and I'm so sorry I didn't get the name. I'm out working. I got loud equipment and everything running out. It's hard for me to kind of keep up. I need to start taking notes, to be honest with you, just jot them in my phone because been some great calls. Someone had called in and talked about listening to us, listening to the pod, and kind of the vibe I got from that call was, you eventually got to pay some of these players. How many do you keep? How many do you prioritize, right? And the way that I look at that's much different than most fans. And I'm not saying I'm right and anyone else is wrong, but you're willing to pay that backside protection at left tackle, right? Other than that, on the offensive line, what I'm finding is you're usually willing to pay 2 offensive linemen pretty darn near top money, right? And think back, David Bakhtiari, really good money, highest paid tackle in the league at the time. Elton Jenkins, left guard, got a good contract. Outside of that, no one else kind of got that extension. So it seems to me that the rotational aspect of what you're willing to pay at each position, if you start with the offensive line, is 2. You're willing to pay 2 guys pretty decent money. So right now on the roster, who are you paying? You're paying Elton Jenkins. Who's going to
thick?
Is thick, and so is that wallet, right? So the other one I think is going to end up being Zach Tom. So you're probably going to extend Zach Tom, and everyone else is just kind of expendable. And I don't mean to be mean, but that's just kind of how that works, right? Now, Rasheed Walker takes another step, and he's going to come up for a contract about the same time that Zach Tom does. What you're probably doing, I'm just saying this is usually how it works. Let's say Rasheed Walker takes a huge step and he proves to be that franchise left tackle, and Zach Tom continues the way he's going, you'll probably see Elton Jenkins in a couple of years kind of get phased out or asked to take, hey, look, let's do a little bit of a pay cut to keep you here type thing. But I just feel like they're willing to pay 2 offensive linemen. When you look at wide receivers, to me, it seems like 1. Although I would be willing to pay 2, it seems like only 1. Think Devontae Adams, who have been the highest paid receivers here in recent history, right? Remember when they let Greg Jennings go in free agency? Well, why did they do that? Their plans were to extend Jordy Nelson, right? They're always willing to pay 1. So I don't want to get too deep down to that rabbit hole, but when the caller said that, Tim, you made that comment, it really triggered that thought in me, like, hey, that would be a fun episode to go, okay, how many positions are you willing to pay top dollar to, essentially, right? Or at least in that realm. So obviously quarterback goes without saying, but running back, they're willing to do 1 running back for the most part too, it seems like, right? Look at what they did with Aaron Jones when he got his original contract extension. You go out and spend that money in free agency on Josh Jacobs. Although if Marshawn Lloyd steps up and he's an absolute beast, you're cooking with Crisco, as we say here in the South.
Remember those 25 minutes when we had Aaron Jones and Josh Jacobs? That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was hilarious. I love the tombstone. I think it was Aaron Alice on Twitter, if I remember correctly. She had put the tombstone up and it said best backfield in the NFL. And it said the date and time, birth to death. And it was literally like 11 minutes or something. So, yeah. But I guarantee you Matt LaFleur felt that way too. We get into the deep contract details here on Edgerrin Cooper. This is where it gets really exciting. In 2024, cap hit $1.5 million. 2025, $1.9 million. 2026, $2.3 million. 2027, $2.7 million as far as cap hit. Now, you'll notice the dead cap that's attached. Let's say that, God, I don't want to say what I'm about to say. And please, guys, I'm not saying this is the case. I think he's going to be an absolute stud. All right. Let's say Edgerrin Cooper doesn't work out. You'll probably let him play that rookie contract out. But if he's an absolute bust, you see the dead cap that's attached in 2027 is only $768,000. And you see the cap hit in general is $2.7 million. You could cut him that last year and free up $2 million if you needed to, right? So just to kind of show you how there's less guarantee involved. Now, if I understood correctly, Marvin Harrison Jr., who was the number 4 overall pick in the draft, his contract's fully guaranteed, if I remember correctly. See, that's obviously something that you can't do there. So it's nice to have those top 5 picks, those top 3 picks, but at the same time, there's some responsibility that comes with it, from a financial standpoint, that you're kind of on the hook for quite a bit of guaranteed money. So with that being said, Jacob, you ready to get into this 53-man roster talk, bro?
Yeesh.
Here we go. All right. So before we dive into it, this was kind of your idea. You had mentioned it. I'm going to give you the floor first here. Is there anything you want to hit on before we dive into what the 53-man roster was in 2023 breaking camp, just to kind of look at how the positions broke down? Is there anything you want to kind of kick off with here? Or are you good to go?
I mean, honestly, it's just weird when you look at the team, because it doesn't feel like we lost that many players. But when you really look at the 53, we really did. And it's kind of some key not key players in the fact where they're going to be really missed. And I don't, as we all know, Pat, once you're a Packer, you're always a Packer. I'm never going to dog guys, but we can definitely make some improvements on this team. I mean, just for instance, if you look at the wide receivers, we kept 6. And I'm using information. I don't know if it's the same list you have, but it was from Packers Wire from August 29th of 2023. So it was like the original initial 53.
Yeah, that's what I've got. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, with the wide receiver room, the way they have them listed too is what I think they thought the depth chart would be. It's 6 wide receivers: Christian Watson, Dobbs, Samori Toure, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, and Malik Heath in that order. Even when you look at that, it's like our room didn't change, but I see that as such weird, dynamic. I would totally swap that whole, I guess, list of as far as 1 to 6 where they're actually fall in the depth chart. And just looking at that at the beginning of last year, I know a lot of us were kind of nervous and really not sure what we were going to get out of that group. And now I look at it and I'm like, dude, that's a stud room right there. So,
yeah, definitely. And I've got the initial 53 as well. So that's what we'll kind of hit on here. Omer in the chat says Cooper and Bullard, the best 2 picks in my humble opinion. Bullard might be my favorite draft pick. Like you watch the tape, he can play the slot. He's aggressive. He knows how to play with leverage in the run game. He was really, granted it's college, and he's got a bunch of all-stars around him at Georgia. We know how they recruit. When we get into our college football podcast, you'll see that. I'm going to break down recruiting. Whew. Those guys just go through the country and go, we'll take that one. We'll take that one. And they're just lining up. And you know why? Because is it Kirby Smart down there, I believe. Kirby Smart's he's pumping out NFL players like crazy, man. And that's what kids want. They want to go to the next level. But so with the initial 53 that I have here on tap, Jacob, you correct me if it doesn't line up with yours. Here's what we got. So when the Packers broke camp in 2023, this was their initial 53. Okay, they carried 2 quarterbacks, Jordan Love and Sean Clifford. Obviously, Michael Pratt now being a draft pick, that's one of the first things that pops up. Are we going to carry 3? Running backs, we carried 3: Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, Emmanuel Wilson. Wide receivers, we carried 6, like you said, Jacob: Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs, Samori Toure, Jaden Reed. Look at Jaden Reed, how he was so far down on the list. Like, we don't know what we got there. Like number 4 wide receiver, if you will. Dontavian Wicks, Malik Heath. Tight ends, they only carried 3 out of camp: Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, and Josiah DeGuara. Obviously, Josiah DeGuara is now in Jacksonville. So if you're only going to carry 3 out of camp, if they only place the amount of value on these tight ends that they did last year, they may carry 2. That might be where you make up your quarterback position. And again, this is going to shuffle around. Your practice squad is going to play a big role. I'm not saying they'll never have 3 tight ends on the roster, but that's the first thing that kind of sticks out. Like, okay, DeGuara not on the roster now. Do they feel like Ben Sims is valuable enough that they would carry him on the 53? I don't know. Offensive linemen, they broke camp with 11. Elton Jenkins, David Bakhtiari, Josh Myers, John Runyon, Yosh Nijman, Royce Newman, Sean Ryan, Zach Tom, Rasheed Walker, Luke Tenuta. So on the surface there, Tim, what sticks out to you, bro? Anything? Obviously, the quarterback position, you can go that route. Tight end, like we mentioned, Josiah DeGuara no longer be on the roster. Are they afraid that maybe Ben Sims gets picked up by someone off waivers? What do you think, man?
Yeah, I'm with you on that, because that's the kind of the question mark really with the tight end room. I don't know. I still see A.J. Dillon flexing into a little bit more of a, I don't know, maybe even playing a little tight end in some of these sets, depending on what we're doing. But Sims is a guy that's worth keeping an eye on, because I do agree with the sentiment that he could very well get picked up. I mean, if he goes to the practice squad, he could get signed. That's, it's hard to protect a guy like that. It's almost like the move we did with Magoo, right? Making him a wide receiver,
right?
Just to kind of protect him and keep him around. Because obviously I don't think the league is chomping at the bit to sign him as a wide receiver. So it's kind of a way to keep an extra quarterback. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I think the thing that, when I look at this list from last year, is the breakdown between offense and defense. I'm wondering if we might see that tilt the other way this year. Maybe we have a little bit more offensive guys on the 53, and then maybe 1 or 2 less of the defenders. Could be wrong. Maybe it's going to be polar opposite. We'll see. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be a lot of movement for sure. And it's also interesting. I know we're doing the way too early kind of prediction or breakdown, but what I always love to see is, like, when you go into the year like this and then you start camp and we start really trying to make a prediction, and then it changes like 3 or 4 or 5 more times before
Every
we're
year.
like really done with preseason. And then you end up like, week 1 and you're looking at your 53 and you're like, man, I did not see it adding up this way. So I don't know. It's just a great time of year and great subject matter, man. This is good ball talk right here on a Saturday morning. I love it.
And to kind of add to what Tim said, Jacob, another thing we get all excited about, I think this guy's over that guy's over this guy. And then you get into camp and injuries happen. It's like, well, they made the decision for us. That guy's going to be on IR for 4 weeks and moving on, right? I've got the depth chart here as well. I can go back and forth to each graphic there if you need it. This is according to ESPN.com, so take it with a grain of salt as far as who is ahead of who. But this is how they see the depth chart currently. What are you thinking on offense, Jacob? Anything stick out to you as far as the final 53 from last year and the current depth chart here, man?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you talked about, it's going to be, do we keep that third quarterback? And if so, where do we subtract from which position group? I can see us going lighter at the O-line, but I also think that there's a better chance that we end up keeping all 4 of those tight ends. And last year we only started with 3. If you flip over to the defensive side, I think that actually is where we maybe could cut a few players. Like Tim said, I think we might be a little offensively heavier, which is interesting because if you look at that defense, I think we lost by far more players on the defense than we did the offense.
That's a great point. Yeah,
It's a great point about the O-line too. Like you said, maybe pull in 1 or 2 of those pieces to create room because we're looking for guys that are versatile. We have some versatile O-linemen, so you may be able to play a little chess there. I like that approach because every spot is valuable.
We all have smartphones, and we all know they're pretty amazing, but they also can be amazingly distracting, especially when we're around other people. So US Cellular wants us to reset our relationship with our phones by putting down our phones for $5. That's right, a company that sells phones wants us to put down our phones. And to see what we find, learn more at uscellular.com/built for us.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Have you ever experienced turbulence on a flight and wondered why?
And you can see all the terrain around you. You've got no issue with visibility or anything?
No, everything's peachy.
Maybe you've sat on the tarmac for hours wondering why your plane isn't moving.
Well, we're outside here. They're saying the ramp is closed. They won't let us park because of Air Force One.
Listen in on the conversations between pilots and air traffic controllers on the Air Traffic Out of Control podcast.
510 Whiskey declaring an emergency. There's smoke in the cabin. I need to make a landing right now on 31 left.
We have the most interesting, wild, and funny ATC recordings you will ever hear. Check out Air Traffic Out of Control wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, when we found out that Zach Tom had tore his pec, that made sense why they went out and signed Andre Dillard two days later. Hindsight's 2020. Now we're finding this stuff out and go, oh, of course they did that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Because I mean, like if you look at this group here, obviously you got the top 5. I mean, you say top 5, Sean Ryan's in that group. I don't know if I even want him making the team, to be honest. We got Morgan and Monk, and I think Tenuta in that next group. So right there, even if you include Ryan, that's 8 guys already, or I should say only 8 guys. Then if you want to end up keeping, I'd say you have to keep Glover and you have to keep Jones. That's up to 10 right there. But again, without Ryan, that's only 9. I mean, I'd almost feel comfortable with that group. You know what I mean?
I feel like it's a pivotal year for Caleb Jones. We got to see how much he's going to see the field and really get a barometer on where his career is heading. He was a guy we were pretty excited about and kind of had some ups and downs and hasn't really seen much action. So it'll be interesting to see because I totally agree with Jacob. I could, take or leave Sean Ryan based on what we've seen the last couple of years. So,
yeah. That pretty much sums it up.
Yes.
So, all right. So that's kind of how the offensive side of the ball looks there from a depth chart standpoint. And again, you're already seeing the injuries start to show a little bit here. Josh Jacobs battling a little bit of an injury. think, was it a hammy? What do you guys remember what that was?
It was hamstring. Yeah,
Hamstring. Okay,
that's
so
the Packer fan trigger word, hamstring.
Exactly. And you got Tucker Kraft and Zach Tom, both tore their pecs bench pressing at the facility. I know immediately people are like, what are these guys doing on their own time? Happened at the facility. Calm down. They were following the new strength and conditioning coach. So, when you kind of look at how the roster shaped out last year with the final 53, again, you carried 11 offensive linemen. Bach is now gone. John Runyon is gone. Yash Navin is gone. Who else do we have here? That's pretty much it, right? Everybody else is still on the team. So you've got 3 holes you had to fill. And when you look at the depth chart, who are those offensive linemen that you'll fill them with? Jordan Morgan's one, obviously. There's a chance for Andre Dillard. Let's hold up there for a second. Jacob Monk will be another one. I'm just about guaranteeing that. It's probably, if you do end up carrying 11, for me, it's probably going to come down to Andre Dillard and Travis Glover. And Travis Glover, I'm trying to remember. I get a couple of these guys mixed up as far as where they were drafted.
Georgia State guy.
Yeah. He was a draft pick, right?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. Which round was he again? I can't remember.
Pick 202. So that would have been what? Was that the 6th or 7th round, Jacob?
Yeah. But also we forgot about this guy that John brought up, the UDFA Donovan Jennings, who I think he has a shot. He's not listed here.
He is not. You're right. Yeah. And that's typically when you've got these undrafted free agents. Now, every year, 1 or maybe 2 will make a roster. It seems like they're in the hunt. When you look at the offensive linemen and how many we drafted, we took 1, 2, 3 draft picks. You're probably going to keep one of those draft picks over Jennings. But I'm with you. I could see Jennings potentially making the roster. If he did, whose place would he take? Right? We're already talking about maybe taking it down to 10 offensive linemen as opposed to 11 breaking camp. I just don't know whose spot he would take. And I'm sure everyone here says Royce Newman, but it's for me. It's I don't know, man.
Goodbye, Newman.
I think higher on Royce than we are. Obviously, Sean Ryan's another one that I don't like seeing him in that starting spot. Man, I just don't. Right. It kind of bothers me. So I think Jacob Monk's really going to come in and shake things up. Now that Zach Tom has got that pec injury, I think through camp you'll probably see a little bit of Jordan Morgan and Rasheed Walker rotating over to right tackle to see who's most comfortable there. Yeah. But it might be one of those things too where they both of them start sandbagging. They mail it in on the right side because they want to be the left tackle type thing because that's where the big money is long term.
I think that's the big thing with Sean Ryan too is that I don't think he has the versatility of some of our other linemen. I think Sean Ryan's truly a guard, and if he can't master that or take a huge leap, he's going to find himself on the bench or looking for a new team, I think, in the future.
And when they did draft him, I feel like they thought he was a little more versatile. It hasn't transferred to the NFL level, right?
Yep.
So, all right, good stuff. You ready to move over to defense, fellas?
I am. Let's go.
All right, defense. We carried 26 last year. Tim was picketing out in front of Lambeau last year out there at Bob Harlan Plaza and said, you better keep more defenders than offensive players. And that's exactly what they did. They carried 1 more than the offensive side of the ball. So defensive linemen, the first thing that sticks out to me here, we carried 6 out of camp. Now keep in mind, we went from a 34 base front to a 4-3 base front. Okay. So about 25 to 30% of the snaps on average across the NFL are in base defense. So the majority is in nickel, right? But when you look at your base defense, you are kind of building out that initial roster. I imagine they could shave this down to 5 defensive linemen because now in your base, you're only running 4 out there, right? So you got to kind of look at it from that perspective. Outside linebackers as well, Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary, Kingsley Enagbare, Lucas Van Ness, Justin Hollins, maybe Brenton Cox Jr. I don't know if they're going to play him as a stack backer or put him on the line as a defensive lineman, but all that entire outside linebacker room is also going to transfer over to defensive line, right? So essentially what you want to look at here is defensive line on this list. You need to break them down as interior defensive linemen. The outside linebackers, you need to treat them like defensive ends. That's essentially how this is going to play out. So when you look at it from that perspective, I don't see them carrying 6 off that list this year. I just don't. I mean, it's going to be tough to cut it down. If I had to guess here, I would say they would bring 5 of that list and free up 1 roster spot. Once again, maybe that's the quarterback position we're looking for, right? But Kenny Clark, TJ Slayton, Devontae White, Kobe Wooden, Carl Brooks. For me, it would probably be Jonathan Ford that would go to the practice squad. Let's start with defensive line and go around the horn here. I'll start with you, Tim, since you're the big defensive guy here. What do you think, man?
I'm feeling a little concerned for my boy Keyshawn Banks. It's going to be tough to find a spot, and I agree with your statement that we may see that position group, as far as the roster breakdown, we may see at least one less. I don't think they go down to 4, but you never know. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's going to be a different scheme change here, obviously going to the 43. So it's tough. There's some of these bubble guys that you're really rooting for, and it's like there's one less spot possibly here on this roster, and it's going to be tough for those guys, fighting for those bottom positions to really find a role. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, Keyshawn Banks, and again, this isn't the tell-all end-all. This is ESPN.com and their early projections, okay? They've got Keyshawn Banks as a weak side linebacker. All right. So going back to defensive line here.
Wow. Because he's listed on Packers.com as a D lineman.
Right. And what's crazy is Packers.com has still got us playing a 34 defense. I'm going, Jacob, will you get on the horn and get everybody? PFF isn't updated. 33 What is going on,
These
Jacob?
guys are all fishing right now, man. They're fishing and drinking Busch lattes.
Crazy, man. The ice is melted. It's time to get back in the office, fellas. Let's go. No more ice fishing. Jacob, what do you think about the defensive line here? With the projection, they've got Preston Smith at left defensive end, Rashawn Gary at right defensive end, Devontae White and Kenny Clark in the middle at defensive tackle. This is your base 4-3, I would imagine. Backups at edge, you've got Lucas Van Ness, Kingsley Nagbare. I agree with that 100%. Carl Brooks and TJ Slayton as your backup defensive tackles. Then you get into the Jonathan Ford, Kobe Wooden. Kobe Wooden put on some weight, so they're definitely going to be playing him at defensive tackle, it seems. Then you got Spencer, I can't say his last name. He may make the practice squad. We'll see. But what do you think here, man? As far as, again, if I bounce back real quick and I'll come back to the depth chart, you tell me which direction you want to go. Last year, they carried what would be a total here, if you included the outside linebackers, of 12 guys that are qualified to be defensive linemen in this year's defense. Obviously, they're not going to carry that many, I can't imagine. Who do you think it'll be here, dude?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at that old list, Hollins is gone, obviously, out of the quote-unquote outside linebacker, the edge, whatever you want to say there. I think Brenton Cox Jr. can put his hand in the dirt and be that, last guy that makes the team still. Mm-hmm. I think Vanessa is going to thrive in that. I think Kingsley will do okay with that. We don't have Campbell, obviously. Tariq Carpenter making the team was kind of a shock to me. I remember that. And then we very quickly let him go. So that's a spot that's wide open right there, no matter how you slice that. Obviously it's slide Edgerrin Cooper into that spot, basically replace him. I do think Jonathan Ford's the odd man out there. Like you talked about, Wooden put on a lot of weight, so I think that he's going to be really taking that role seriously. So I think it'll be a good camp to see where between him, Slayton, and Brooks are, like how they see those guys with this new defense. That'll be interesting. But then that safety position, look at that. Savage is gone. I don't know what's going on.
Ford's gone.
Owens is gone. Please, I hope
Levitt's gone.
Levitt is gone.
Johnson, yeah.
And then it's Ant. So, I mean, and we obviously know we got a lot of guys, a lot of new guys. I thought it was interesting. They got Kitan in the third spot there behind Evan Williams, but I think it might be fair because of the injury. So
that's probably got a lot to do with it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that's new here. I mean, people, like I said, maybe don't feel like we have a really, that's a new defense. That's a pretty new defense there, especially with the younger talent too. The backup linebacker position, Christian Young, he was a really good special teamer, if I'm not mistaken. So we have to start thinking about that kind of aspect too. Is like Tim talked about the Keyshawn Banks. I think he was the only guy that wasn't at camp, if I'm not mistaken. I think he was the one that had that family issue or something going on there. So keep an eye on that. Raylan Goforth, that's my guy, the beard dude. I don't see a way he really makes it on this team, barring some crazy stuff. But I'm pulling it.
Yeah, pretty cool name. Go forth and smack someone in the mouth.
Kalen King, I think, has to make this team somehow. So
I agree. Yeah, that's where it gets tough, man. When you get into the backside of the defense, and when you mentioned Oladapo, we all are very high on Oladapo. He was 85th on my big board. but the Packers took him at 169. So when you see Evan Williams ahead of him on the depth chart, you immediately go, wait, hold up a minute. Well, Evan Williams, they took him with the 111th pick. I mean, you're talking about they had him, 58 spots higher than Oladapo. What the hell do we know, right? But now, obviously, Ola Home Depot, we want him to be the prized possession of this draft. The question is, will he be, right? But I think it's pretty apparent that the Packers see Evan Williams as a much better player for sure as the music starts to kick in here. But again, Evan Williams, I had in the 216 spot, right? Oladapo at 85. It's going to be interesting, man, to see. They're really, really high on Evan Williams. So let's see. John in the chat says Tenuta was placed on IR a couple of days after final cuts to make room for a long snapper. So they really went into the season with 10 offensive linemen, not 11. There you go. So this was the initial that they broke camp with. And that's the gymnastics that takes place, right? Where they can kind of finagle the roster requirements and everything.
That comment just made me realize, like you said, what chess pieces possibly could be. Like if Catan doesn't get healthy, if who's the tight end that I can't stand? Tyler Davis, if he maybe comes in somehow. I shouldn't say that. I'm sure he's a nice dude. Or
tell him why you don't like him, Jacob. It's really personal. It's a huge personal issue. Tell him, Jacob. Make something up real quick.
He can block. That old sift. I tell you what.
Zip block. Jacob got frustrated with me because we were doing chalk talks, and I'm like, you notice they're doing a lot of sifting. What I mean by that is when you run what they call split zone or split flow run and play, it's an inside zone run where the H, the wing, or the Y will come all the way across the formation and block down. And what it does is it allows you to seal off the backside so the tackle on the opposite side of the run side can come in and steal a gap is essentially what it is. So it's like, Tyler Davis actually sift blocks pretty good. Jacob, I'm tired of hearing about the sift block. Does it matter? It's a valid argument, I got to admit. So that's the thing too. Yeah, Omer in the chat says, which by the way, the profile pic makes me giggle every time. Tyler Davis is key for teams. He ain't going anywhere. If I understood correctly, I heard somebody say on Twitter he led in special teams tackles before he tore his ACL. I don't know if it was the year before or leading up to that point because he tore it in camp, so it must have been the year before. So he is a key special teams player. There's no doubt. So, I could see that being the case there as well. They'll probably break camp with all four of those guys, I would imagine. But it sounds like Tyler Davis is fully healthy from the ACL too. So I know he's got the cue there. They're trying to work him back in. But, yeah, he is definitely healthy as it sits right now. So when you go back to the final 53 from last year, we talked about the defensive lineman a touch. The inside linebackers now, that becomes your linebacker room. So we were heavy on defensive line because all the outside linebackers, for the most part, will transfer over to defensive ends, but it makes you light at the inside linebacker position because you've got to pick up that position. You got to pick up one in that spot. Let's say you're just going to run with two weak side backers, 2 Wills, 2 Sams, and 2 Mikes. If you run with that, then you need 6 there. We only carried 5 last year, so that's where you're going to kind of pick that up. So when we look at the defensive depth chart here, the way that ESPN sees it, and this, I'm seeing this more and more, guys. I don't know if they've got inside information or they're just swinging for the fences, but they've got Edgerrin Cooper pretty consistently listed as Mike. I've noticed that across multiple websites. Typically, when you get multiple people talking about that, it means someone within the building has told them off the record, hey, they see him as a Mike. And it could just be too, Tim, that they're going into camp going, let's see if he can handle Mike. And that's the information they're going off of. But nonetheless, they got Edgerrin Cooper as the Mike, Quay as the Will, Isaiah McDuffie as the Sam. And then behind them, you've got the backup Mike being Eric Wilson, which I absolutely love Eric Wilson. I'm so glad he's on this roster, man. Talk about another team's player. They got Tyron Hopper as a Sam backer, and then they've got Christian Young as the backup Will. Then after him, you got Keyshawn Banks. The third string Mike is Christian Welch, and then you've got Raylan Goforth in the fourth string spot. At the Sam backer spot, you got Aaron Mosby backing up Tyron Hopper. So if you were to carry 6 here, and I feel like 6 is probably the minimum they would break camp with the new 4-3 base, my 6 would definitely be obviously Quay Walker, Edgerrin Cooper, Isaiah McDuffie. You definitely add in Eric Wilson. That makes 4. Tyron Hopper is going to make it. That's 5. So who's the 6? You talk about a competition that you need to watch in the weekend, man. Christian Young, Keyshawn Banks, Christian Welch, and Aaron Mosby. I would probably give Christian Welch the nod over Christian Young because there's a good chance you could fit Christian Young on your practice squad there. And again, just because they've got these guys specifically listed as Sam, Will, and Mox, it doesn't mean necessarily the Packers see it like that fully. But Tim, what do you think about the linebacker room? Do you think they carry 6? Who knows, man? They may come out and carry 7, right?
I'm with you. I think 6 is probably the floor. It's probably the minimum I see them going with. It's funny because, just a few weeks ago, we were talking about, the holes in the linebacker room. And now it looks like we've got plenty of personnel here and to really choose from. But I'm with you. This is going to look totally different as we roll into camp. Like, as far as Mike and Will and Sam, who's going to be what. But I agree with your assessment. Those would be my 6 as well. And the most intriguing part to me is going to be to see Christian Young and Keyshawn Banks battling for that second on the depth chart kind of role.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And you guys in the chat, let us know, do you think they'll carry only 6 linebackers, or do you think they'll carry more? We definitely want to get your take. Just put the number that you think they'll carry. Go ahead, Jacob. What do you think about linebacker, bro?
I mean, yeah, I'm very happy with our starting 3. And for the first time in, I think, a long time, I'm excited. I shouldn't say excited, but optimistic about the competition we have in the number 2 string. With Wilson, we know what he can do. I think it's going to come down to how well these guys can play on special teams. And I think Christian Welch was one of our best special teamers that we had. I know Eric Wilson is. I'd like to think that the reason that they drafted Tyron Hopper so high is they thought that at the very least he could come in and be an instant special teams ace. And we've seen that he does make great hits. He takes good angles. He's a faster guy. So I could hopefully see him sliding into the team with a big emphasis on a special teams play.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so the chat chimes in. Omer says 6 sounds better to me. Romero says 6. John says 6 human meat missiles, please.
That's what she said. Michael.
God almighty. Jacob, every time something like this happens, I can't help but notice you're always right in the middle of it. Every single time.
Just standing here, man.
Just standing here. Oh, man. CJN says, I'm thinking 6. Wouldn't be surprised with 7. Yeah. And it's going to come down, I think, too, on the backside, how well these safeties perform, right? Maybe they shave off a spot at the safety position and carry 1 extra linebacker for team purposes. That could be the case, too. Also, keep in mind with the new kickoff rules, you might value linebackers more than you value safeties now because it is more of a running play than it is really a kick return. They're so close together. You're probably looking for those guys that are built there in between. I'll tell you who sticks out to me when I think of the new rules there and just being aggressive, beat the guy in front of you and go make the tackle. Because there's not a whole lot of setting the edge. There's not a whole lot of run gap responsibilities from a sense of, okay, you got to shift from pass rush to run defense. Jacob, you're going to love this. The one that comes to mind for me is your boy Brenton Cox Jr. I'm wondering if he might be able to thrive in those new kickoff rules. So we'll see how that shakes out. All right, let's see here. Yeah, there's another one. Omer says Eric Wilson also key on teams. I think Eric Wilson he's a lot. If there was some kind of bet US number on Eric Wilson, will he make the roster or not? And you could put money on it. I'd probably bet the farm on that.
Yeah,
barring an injury,
Yeah, arguably a top 5 special teamer if you really look at the list of guys who really make an impact on special teams.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to just talk about the fumble recovery in San Francisco. I mean, there were a lot of plays last season that he was just clutch.
Yeah. Yeah. Christian nailed it here. Says Eric Wilson's underrated. He could play. Seems like the chat pretty much agrees with us on that. And also Omer said he'll join that club with you there, Jacob. Yes, I want to see Brenton Cox Jr. for sure. So, all right, cool. That's how the defense kind of looks on the surface from the defensive line and linebacker perspective. When we go to the DBs now, I knew we would spend more time on defense because the offense to me is pretty well set. We kind of know what we have there. Arguably a top 10 offense last year. We're trying to install this new defense here this year. Cornerbacks, we only carried 4 out of camp. Jair Alexander, Rasul Douglas, Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine. Rasul's gone. So when you look at the depth chart, at the cornerback position, the way that ESPN sees it is Jair Alexander and Eric Stokes are the starters. Then you've got Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine. So those would be your 4 if you only broke camp with 4. So the question is it worth it to tie up a roster spot for Corey Ballantyne? Is it worth it to tie up a roster spot for Robert Rochelle or Benny Sapp Jr. or Kalen King? This is where it gets tough, fellas, because me personally, I want Corey Ballantyne and Kalen King on this roster. Now, if you can guarantee me nobody will pick them up, yes, stash them on the practice squad. The problem is other teams have seen that 2022 tape of Kalen King too. I guarantee you the reason the Packers drafted him with the 255th pick is because they were catching wind that other people were going to be outbidding them in undrafted free agency. So that kind of shows you this kind of feels like almost like, I know Brenton Cox Jr. wasn't a draft pick, if I remember correctly, but it kind of feels like the Brenton Cox Jr. of this year that they'll probably look to keep Kalen King on the 53-man roster to keep people from poaching him, like they tried your boy there last year with Brenton Cox Jr., Jacob. But I think there's a good chance we carry 5, maybe even 6 corners coming out of camp here. This is where it gets tough, man. We're going to have a really hard time trimming this down. And again, I almost said hopefully. I'm glad I didn't. I didn't mean it that way. But most likely injuries will help make those decisions for us coming out of camp, unfortunately. Go ahead, Jacob. What do you think about corner, man?
I have to agree with M. Smitty right here. I feel like, like you said, barring injury, which unfortunately is probably going to happen. I don't want to wish that upon anyone, but I would be totally comfortable with Jair Stokes, Ballantyne, and Ballantyne. You have to keep Nixon, obviously. And then, you got to get away to get Kalen King on this roster. And Robert Rochelle and, Benny Sapp, those types of players, I appreciate what they've done, but I have no issues with sliding them onto the practice squad. I'm pretty sure they're both eligible. Guys like Mosby, Goforth, Welch, even if we have to. Like, I think we can make that leap and not have to worry about it. I really do think that somebody's going to poach Kalen King. It's crazy to me that he fell that far. I don't think Ballantyne would make it. I think people have seen too much, for where he was and where he's progressed. I think that we need to keep him as well. I see us having to keep 6, and I think there is going to be a way to maybe do that, and the 3 quarterbacks, and I think it's going to although come out of the defensive line linebacker area. So I don't know. Yeah, there's going to be hard decisions. And like you said, you don't want an injury, but in some weird capacity, you almost I don't want to say you do, but it'll help shift things around so that you could possibly get the best 53 possible.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And kind of surprising here, Tim, in the comments. I guess it's not surprising, but it's a conversation we've had pretty much all year. CJN says not sold with Nixon there at the third left cornerback. He actually meant second. Obviously, he would be the nickel back there, right? The nickel corner. Omer says, I want Nixon out of the secondary myself, but not looking like it. It seems like they're kind of high on him there, but that's where the versatility comes in of making a draft pick like a Javon Bullard, where Javon Bullard can slide in there and play in the slot. So when you look at the safety position, Tim, and you can continue to touch on corner as well, man, it kind of ties together here. They've got Javon Bullard as a starting strong safety alongside Xavier McKinney. And then obviously Evan Williams and Anthony Johnson Jr. backing those 2 guys up. Then it gets to Katan Oladapo, then Zane Anderson. If you treated Javon Bullard as an extra slot defender, it doesn't affect the 53-man roster. That's the one thing I will mention, because you're not going to cut Keyshawn Nixon. He's the best kick returner in the game, right?
It may affect your depth chart. That's about it. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So I think when you're in nickel, if Javon Bullard shows, hey, this dude is just an absolute play, it's going to come down to 2 things. Javon Bullard, how effective he is in the slot during camp, and Evan Williams, how effective he can be on the field as a safety. If that's the case, Javon Bullard might take that nickel slot spot from Keyshawn Nixon. Like you said, though, Tim, it's not going to affect the 53. But what do you think when it comes to cornerback safeties here, man?
I think Jacob had a good point about Robert Rochelle and Benny Sapp as far as their contributions. But the thing that gets me is the special teams aspect, like we just talked about some of the other position groups. Rochelle and Benny Sapp are special teamers for sure. At least they were last year. So that could, one of those guys could maybe sneak onto this 53 in that, just based off of the special teams aspect. But I don't know, I'm not going to say that with any degree of certainty. I will say the glaringly obvious thing when it comes to corner that is really going to have an impact on how this roster is set up is the play of Eric Stokes Jr. Is Stokes Jr. going to have a monster camp? He spent his entire camp last year doing rehab. It was, interesting to watch, to see him progress and actually eventually find his way back to the field, although it was kind of brief during the season. If he's healthy and he's improved and he's like, I don't know what the word is, reinvigorated, or, finds that new fire or that second gear, and we really see, the Eric Stokes that we saw during his rookie year, that can make things really interesting in the secondary room. Now, however, if it's kind of the same thing we have seen from Stokes, I don't think it's a surefire guarantee that he starts. I really don't. I think there's enough talent in the cornerback room, especially, don't sleep on a guy like Kalen King. You can't. I mean, the guy's hungry. If he has a good showing and proves that he can play, he could work his way up that depth chart really quickly, honestly. So I do think 6 corners is probably a good number. But again, to me, it hinges on that opposite corner position. I don't see it as a surefire thing that Stokes is the starter. I know I'm going to get dragged because popular opinion is, Stokes, that's his spot to lose. And it's true. It probably is. If you look at it right now, yeah, he's probably that dude based on how the roster's structured, as we sit today. But, in the next few months, man, this could look totally different.
I've got an interesting question that I haven't thought about until just now. So for the first time in a long time, you could argue that we're pretty set at a lot of skill positions, almost to the point where we're trying to figure out if we're going to get these guys on the roster. Where, if any, in the starting lineup do you see us possibly making a trade to open up a roster spot because we're so comfortable with the backup and we'd want to maybe get some draft picks for the future or something like that?
Man, we are heading into uncharted territories here, because
it's almost a conspiracy kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? Just saying.
I'm telling you, man. Yeah, let's just hit it. So, yeah, there was a conversation about wide receiver the other day, guys, that are we so deep at wide receiver? What if someone comes calling and they want one of these guys?
You hush your mouth there. You don't say that.
You don't say that.
You don't say that.
You don't shut your mouth when you're talking to me. It's crazy to think about, because, the wide receiver room is so strong. It's so deep. But, I mean, it is kind of if you were to stay, all right, you look at every position on this team, and you had to pick one position where you go, okay, you got to give up one in a trade for a draft pick. Wide receiver probably comes to mind for me the soonest, because when you look at corner, I hate to be that guy, but Eric Stokes is the one I'd be like, if somebody be willing to offer a second or a third round pick for him, oh yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen though.
I don't either. I don't think people, from what he's put on tape, and that's why I said, Tim, you're not going to catch any hate here, because that's the true value of a player, guys. It's not what we think about them or where they were drafted. It's what would the market warrant for them? What could they get on the open market? That's what they're worth. I always use I crack up at people with real estate, and they're like, my house is worth more than that. What's the biggest offer you got there, Hosscat? That's what your damn house is worth. Sorry to break it to you, but it's only worth what someone else is willing to pay or give up in exchange for it, right? But yeah, when you look at the wide receiver room, that's the one that sticks out to me. Like Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Bo Melton, Malik Heath. If someone came calling for Grant DuBose, if someone came calling for Samori Toure, I'm trading one of those guys.
I mean, Toure, yeah. Grant DuBose is going to be on
Toure, man. Y'all shoved him right to the curb.
Let me tell you, that's going to be one of the most fun battles to watch.
Yes,
is Samori Toure and Grant DuBose, battling it out this year at camp. I'm telling you right now, man, I've seen some workout film on Grant DuBose. You talk about a guy that's hungry.
So
I mean, he got cheated out of a season last year, really.
Yeah, I could see the two realistic options. If we wouldn't have signed him already and given him the money, I would have said for sure Nixon, just because whatever. Some of the stuff he's done lately just doesn't rub me the right way on the field, off the field. I don't know if you saw the interview with him, but they asked him like, "Hey, have you been like, working out in the offseason?" He's like, "Oh, no. I was working on getting my contract." And I was like, I just don't like that attitude or that mind frame. But the one that I think is most realistic would be, unfortunately, Sean Clifford.
Oh, that's
a great point.
I didn't even think about that.
That's a great point.
That to me, it just makes the most logical sense. I mean, I know we gave up draft capital for him, so we'd probably want to get something back for him. Michael Pratt, obviously, we just drafted him, and I think that he may be a little bit of a more promising up and coming prospect, but I don't know.
Younger also.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll tell you what.
What I struggle with the receiver room is everybody that's got potential value are guys that I don't want to let go. I don't want to.
No, I'm with you, Tim. I completely understand. But the reality is, you look up and you go, okay, we broke camp with 6 wide receivers, right? So you look at the depth chart. Let's say all these guys are healthy. Once you get past Ontavian Wicks, Bo Melton, and Malik Heath, it's like these guys are going to go to the practice squad. And if someone is willing to give a draft pick up, whether it's a 5th round pick or a 7th round, whatever it is, any kind of compensation, some people will go, I don't want to give up Grant DuBose for a 6th round pick. I don't either. But if you try to stash him on the practice squad, guess what? That team's going to get him for nothing.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So those are the conversations that are going to come into place.
So
and
Jacob, if what happens would, like Jacob said, if let's say hypothetically they deal Sean Clifford, do they instantly convert Magoo back to quarterback?
No.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing about the Magoo thing. You guys see Magoo as a wide receiver here. He's a quarterback.
Yeah.
Like this is exactly what Jacob. I think it was Jacob. It might have been you, Tim, that said at the top of the show here. This is for those people who aren't keeping real close tabs on every roster across the league, and I mean front offices. The more that we show him on the wide receiver depth chart, it's going to make teams go, maybe he's not a quarterback. And in our mind, that's our emergency quarterback.
Right. We're playing chess, not checkers.
Bingo. And listen, 90% of the front offices, they understand that. They're not getting fooled. But it's just, why not go ahead and do that, right? Why not go ahead and try him at receiver, and you got an emergency quarterback if you need it. But I don't think they'll trade Sean Clifford, Jacob. But if a team does come calling and they say, hey, we'll give you a 3rd, that would be kind of hard to turn that down to flip. What was he, a 5th round pick?
Yeah.
So you flip a 5th into a 3rd. Now, I'm not suggesting that's what his value is. But again, that's why we queued up the conspiracy music. We're going to hate on us for even talking about trades right now. But these are some of the conversations that come into play when
trade Sean Ryan.
Yeah. What happens too, and
Goody's like,
I'm not going to, so quit asking.
And people are like, how these trades come into play, guys, is teams will start calling the Packers because they know if you go to try to stash him on the practice squad, all 32 teams can go sign insert name of player. So if they've got someone that they had a significantly high grade on in the draft, that's where it kind of starts. And then their NFL scouting team shows, hey, he played pretty well in his limited time. Also, like when you look at someone like Sean Clifford, if Jordan Love continues to play the way he did in the second half of the season, this is how teams shop for quarterbacks. They go, who's got the best starting quarterback? Okay, they know how to develop. They know how to draft and develop at that position. Let's see what they got in the backup room. Okay, go pull the college tape. Damn, Sean Clifford, he played a lot of snaps in college. That dude's got a lot of experience. That's where the value might rise as opposed to where it wasn't as high there, during the draft process when Sean Clifford was taken in the 5th round. So the Packers took him in the 5th round because they caught wind someone else was on him at that point, right? We all had him as an undrafted free agent. That's why everybody went, who?
What if Clifford balls out in the preseason?
Exactly. And that's when you get and here you get a contender, a team that's somewhat of a contender, and they go, you know what? Their quarterback goes down. Well, all right, that's the first thing you're going to look at. Who's performing well in special or in preseason? Okay, this Sean Clifford kid. All right, let's go watch the tape. How many snaps has he played? That type of thing. You spot on.
Prince was saying, he said he'd really need to shine in preseason to get the interest up. Was not really highly touted coming out of college, but that's the thing. He already had a preseason's worth of tape where people were like, "Dang, that's mini Brett Favre."
Yeah, right.
Just slinging it. So I mean, if he has another good one, I think that only really drastically improves his stock.
And people roll their eyes now, but we got multiple comments going. It's time to see Sean Clifford. Jordan Love stinks. You guys remember that in the first half of the season? Like, it got loud where people wanted to see Sean Clifford as a starting quarterback. Thank God it didn't get completely to that point. But there were times that it was just like, please, I want this to work out for Jordan Love so bad, man. That dude has done everything right. But let's wrap up in the chat here with the 57-minute mark. If you guys and gals would, please take just a quick second and hit that like button for us. Feel free to subscribe to the channel as well. And we appreciate y'all hanging out with us here on this Sunday morning. Let's see here. CJN earlier today said, a gift that will keep on giving. Human Meat Missile Award for the best defensive play of the game.
Nice.
I think we need to make that happen, fellas.
Like a Dundee. I'll get one made. He probably wouldn't look the best.
He said like a Dundee. I love it. All right. Next comment was Coach Lynn said, Javon Bullard, Evan Williams, and Kalen King can all play nickel. It's a great point.
Yep.
And he went on to say the Packers hammered the nickel position in the draft. That might be why Keyshawn's a little pissy, to be honest with you, Jake. That could have something to do with it. And then Deadfish had a comment here, too, that was interesting. He said maybe Katano Ladapo can play linebacker on passing downs. That was specifically mentioned by Brian Gutekunst after the draft, that he could play what they call big nickel. And big nickel.
As long as this isn't Tariq Carpenter all over again, I'm open to it.
Exactly. Big nickel is it's a very broad term that people use. Some people will suggest it in different manners. The way that I understand big nickel, when you hear us say big nickel, is you take that slot corner out of the game and you put a safety in that spot. And typically it's in a situation where they can cheat toward the box just a touch. So essentially it's like a 4-3 defense, although you're technically in a nickel, which nickel equals 5 cents, right? The reason it's called nickel defense is because there's 5 DBs on the field. You're just exchanging a slot corner for a safety, and then you could play that hybrid safety as a stack backer. So you're technically in a nickel set, but it's more of a 4-3 type look. That makes sense. So that's what they mean by playing big nickel. And Katana Ladapo was specifically mentioned by Brian Gutekunst as being able to play big nickel in the box. So I think you're spot on there, Deadfish. And I could be wrong, Tim, and I understand you being hesitant in what you just said there, but I think Catan is different than Tariq Carpenter.
Oh, absolutely.
When you look at Tariq Carpenter's college tape and you look at Catan, it's like, yeah, this is probably what they were trying to make Tariq Carpenter into, right?
Right. That's what I kind of meant about it. I mean, it's obviously onto the player, and I just meant that situation. I kind of feel for Tariq Carpenter, he was trying to make that team. He's trying to get his legs under him and figure out where he's going to play. They want him to play a little here, a little there. And he kind of did okay at both, but not really great or good. And he's not a Packer anymore. And that's what I'd like to avoid with a guy like Oladapo. So I think you're right. I think he's cut from a different cloth, probably a little more versatile. I mean, like we just said, whether it's linebacker, whether it's deep, whether it's even slot in a pinch. So, we'll see what happens for sure. Anything that gets these guys on the 53, I'm all for it.
Yeah, definitely. Jake, if you got anything else, bub?
No. Do you guys know when the next public OTA is?
Yeah, got it right here. Glad you asked. Look at us being organized.
All right.
Jacob prepped me for that offline. So first week of OTAs obviously were scheduled May 20th, 21st, and 23rd. Then they continued May 28th, 29th, and 31st. So they'll be back in-house on the 28th. We'll probably get some media availability on the 29th, I would imagine. So should get some more footage, and they'll go through their next install, that type of thing. Then they'll return again June 3rd, 4th, and 6th. And then the offseason program wraps up with mandatory minicamp, which, by the way, 100% attendance. Give the guys a round of applause. That's absolutely awesome. The fact that first time since LaFleur has been here, he had 100% buy-in, 100% participation. And I know people immediately – thank you. People immediately want to blame Aaron for that, but last year they didn't have 100% buy-in, and Aaron was not here. So at some point we got to stop blaming everything on Aaron Rodgers and Joe Barry, right? The fact that they had 100% attendance, Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur has the keys now, Jacob. Matt LaFleur is now saying, look at me. Look at me.
It's pronounced Tupac LaFleur in 2024.
We got to get that screen grab back, by the way.
All eyes on me.
All eyes on OTA is what you.
Yeah, and it's the bottom line here. Literally, the team will announce at a later date which OTAs or mini camps will be, if any, keyword if any, will be open to the public. To the best of my knowledge, nothing has been open to the public just yet. It usually isn't this early. That doesn't stop me from hanging around until they kick me out. So I'll do my best to peek through the little holes in the tarp on the fence when I can. But hopefully maybe that switches up. You never know. There's a lot of excitement around this team, this season based on how we ended last year, and then the changes that have been made. Some pretty gigantic changes with this team. So maybe they do, open up one of these mini camps or something, even if it's just one day, and they take the tarp down and let us watch. But we also know, if you're doing install, or if you're starting to do install and you're formulating your plan, maybe the Packers only want certain things on film and certain eyes on their players. So there could be a legitimate reason why the public is not invited to all of these.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You guys are wondering, what do you do when you go to practice? Tim just goes over and makes sure everybody is ready for the season, man.
Yeah, our guys better wake up with their piss hot, like I said before. So
that's right, Tupac LaFleur.
Don't you forget. And then if security tries to kick him out, Jacob, this is how you approach it.
How about these hands?
About to catch these hands over
I
here.
just tell him I'm with Larry.
Yeah.
I'm with the Rock and his pinky. We're all good.
Yeah. Nobody gonna mess with you there. So I want to give a special shout out to our Patreon community. You guys and gals are absolutely awesome. Conversation in there has been great. We decided we're going to launch a college football podcast here on the channel and kind of gear it around a Packer fan's perspective. So we're keeping up with the top prospects, and it also is a good way to kind of take a look at the Wisconsin Badgers, which we got a lot of Badger fans in here as well. And just some of the top programs. We'll keep up with recruiting. Another thing I like to do is like sort by state and go, okay, who are the top recruits in the state of Wisconsin? And these might be some kids that are local to some of the towns that our listeners are located at. And that's really cool. When you get in the fall, you get in August and September. Hey, I know that guy's the number 4 prospect in the state of Wisconsin. I'm gonna hop over there and watch him play Friday night. You know what I mean? Support the local kids. So
that to me is the most interesting part of the college aspect. Being not a college guy, because it's like, as an NFL fan, you want to keep your eye on the pulse of college for your drafting, but it's like, if you go to college, now we're going to high school and looking at some of these top recruits, and I think that's really cool, man. I'm looking forward to coming along for the ride.
It just ties this America's game all together. High school is where it really kind of starts, and you've got coaches that are climbing the ranks and trying to get to the college level. There's just a lot that you could talk about. If I could name this entire podcast just one thing, I would steal a little bit off of the NFL Network's production, America's Game, and just call it that, and just talk about football at all levels, because it is America's passion. Baseball is America's pastime. Football is America's passion. There's no two ways about it. But as far as the Patreon group, we ran that idea about the college football podcast by that crew, because they're the ones who are contributing to the show. There's 3 different tiers you can join in there. One at $3 a month, and just to join that community, we try to give extra content, give extra input. We're going to ask questions in there and share their answers live on the show. It's just a good way for people to support the show and us try to give back. We also do giveaways ever so often. The next one coming up is going to be an autographed Brett Favre picture we're going to be giving away. And the way that works is, if you're a member of the Patreon group, we'll put everybody who's a member on a wheel, spin it live on the show, and then give that piece of memorabilia away. I know Jacob's got an autographed football that's going out to a lucky winner here on the last giveaway. Before that, we had that football was autographed by Paul Hornung. Before that, we had a Paul Hornung autographed jersey. And like I said, this would be a Brett Favre picture autograph. Then we got some other cool stuff coming down the pike as well. So if you guys want to join that, there's a link in the YouTube description of the video here. It's you can go to patreon.com/PackerFan Total Access. So it's one word, Packer Fan Total Access. And we appreciate those guys and gals over there supporting the show. It means the world to us. So that being said, we're out of here. We'll be back tonight for PTA Live at 7 p.m. Central Time. Tomorrow morning, I think we're going to launch the new college football podcast. So we're just going to do kind of a preseason show real quick, top 25 early prediction rundown. We'll do a Heisman race rundown showing you, all right, here's the top Heisman odds from a betting standpoint. And we'll also get into some of the top recruiting classes as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. And what's cool is I'm not as plugged into college football as I once was, because I follow the Packers so close. This is something we're all just like this. We're going to learn together. right? It's just going to be us sharing information on screen. If you want to, you may have never watched college football and you just want to dabble in it a bit, feel free to jump in on that podcast. It's going to be a lot of fun. So it's not going to interfere with PTA, though. Like I was talking to Tim offline, I talked to Jacob about it. PTA Live is, for the most part, going to be slated for 7 p.m. Central every evening. The goal is to do a show every day. Sometimes my wife threatens to divorce me, and I have to take a night off, okay? So there's a chance that it might not be every single day, but the goal is going to be to keep that in the slot. We'll still try to do some Good Morning Lambeau, but we'll sprinkle in some college football podcasts as well. So season's right around the corner, man. It's going to be August before you know it, and college football is going to be getting kicked off and all that good stuff. So again, thank you to the Patreon group. Thanks to everybody watching in here. Tim, help me out here, man.
For those of you listening on the pod,
thank you for making us a part of your day. Jacob's like, I wish I'd never said that. As always, let's go out and be the change we want to see in the world and go back up.